Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Old Hunt, where we are still celebrating 10 years of Bloodborne. We are playing through version 1.00 of the Japanese release, and last time we finally made some decent progress through the Nightmare of Mensis. So that was exciting. Even more exciting, at the end of the last episode, I discovered a place where I could get radial gem drops that would boost my elemental damage. And that was huge. That opened the floodgates for me. So let me show you what's happened to my character. You'll note my Arcane is now up to 65. That is significantly above, right? I was hovering around 50 or so by the end of the last episode. That is significantly above where I was before. It's something like 15 levels in between episodes. How did that happen? Well, I finally got a decent gem set up on my weapon, which allowed me to make major progress with the bosses that I was having trouble with in the chalice dungeons. So I have now completed the lower Loran chalice as well as the defiled chalice. They're done. They're over. Maybe. Oh, I don't know. I don't know if I can go back on what I said on this earlier in the playthrough because it's still going to potentially add a lot of time. But there is now the slimmest of possibilities that I'll get to show off Queen Yharnam in all her glory. I don't know. We'll have to figure that out as I continue to play the game. In any case, I did want to show off because, right, this is, celebration of all aspects of Bloodborne after 10 years, and we've been talking a lot of lore, but this time I want to swing things a little bit more in a mechanical direction, right? And I want to sort of document the fact, because again, this is 1.00, and it's an interesting thing to experience what it would have been like to play through this version of Bloodborne, right? The thing that you could have been playing from day one. Especially if you never updated it, right? This is still the experience you have if you, grab a physical copy of Bloodborne. So it took me a long time, but I discovered that enemy, by the way, that dropped it, our familiar friend from the both the Nightmare Frontier and the Nightmare of Mensis, right? Apparently they have about a 4.5% chance of dropping a gem shape outside of waning, right? So let's go to the gem setup here and go to the sauce beer, and you can see that, we have all of these different waning options for elemental damage. And, in particular, this shape was pretty key towards the start of my trying to set out to make an Arcane build, because this is typically the slot where you're doing the conversion, right? It's the first sort of elemental boost that you get, and therefore it tends to be associated with flipping the damage from whatever physical you'd be doing to the elemental type, right? So this is how my damage is getting to this particular type. And for a long time, right, you can see right now, I have a bolt gem radial here. I have a bolt gem radial in both of these places, and I have a bolt gem in the waning slot. And you can see over on the right-hand side of the screen here, we have a 12.1% boost to bolt, and from the first one, a 12.6% from the second one, and only a 9.1 percentage boost, but we're also just adding a flat 31.5, to bolt from the waning. And, interestingly enough, right, if we go up here and compare, this is a 12.6% boost from a waning gem that we can get to bolt, but our damage goes down by 21 points if we ignore just the flat addition of that 31.5. So the percentages aren't everything, right? Maybe, and my Arcane is at 65, which is higher than the 50 that you would normally stop the stat at. Now, to be fair, as I already said, 50 is the point over which your weapons really stop getting you much in terms of scaling for your stats, right? But just look at this, right? Plus 207, that's more than the base damage of 157 that I'm adding in boosts from that, conversion from my Arcane stat. Let's take out these gems, and all of a sudden, I'm down to 138. That is almost 70 points of damage that I'm lacking because I only had this thing. And this is how I played most of the game, right? So for most of this playthrough, all the way through to the second boss in the defiled chalice and the final boss of the lower Loran chalice, I just had this 157 plus 138 for my bolt damage. And I think it was even lower for fire, right? Because if I come back here for fire, 106, right? So pretty significant difference in damage. But thankfully, there was that 4.5% chance. And now I've got in addition, right, you can see here, I've got some fire damage that I can do here. So I have options for a full set of bolt gems on this weapon, and also a full set of fire gems for this weapon. And because of that, I actually want to show off, while at the same time, I can show you the sort of route that I used in order to do that farming. And I can also show you the difference, and I think this is going to be interesting if you haven't seen it before, the difference it makes to know exactly what defense of an enemy you're targeting that they're weak to. So this is my bolt setup, right? So we're adding, I went away from the screen, but I can still show it here, right? We're adding, this is the rifle spear. I don't want that one. I want this one, actually. We're adding 207 to a 157 base damage, right? So that sounds like a lot, right? Well, we're going to go back to the Nightmare of Mensis, and we're going to see practically what happens when you target a defense the enemy is strong for. Once again, we are here, of course, in the Nightmare of Mensis. Also, just so you're aware, I have two, what's it called? The discovery boosting runes, right? Of course, I have 2 eye runes. So that's boosting my discovery, makes it more likely that I'll get a drop. It doesn't make it more likely that I'll get a good drop, just more likely that I'll get a drop in general from an enemy. And I run back here. I ignore that frenzy build-up because it's never going to be a serious issue. And we come over here to our good friend, who starts out looking the wrong way, but, you know, will turn and surprise you like that. Look at this. That is a full 3-hit combo involving a transformation attack. 5 hits it took, right? And then look at that. Okay, so we got a fire gem. Now, I have a pet theory that, like, I don't think it's particularly strong. I have a pet theory that there is potentially a benefit to targeting that enemy with bolt damage if you want a bolt gem. Could be totally inaccurate, so be very careful. Take this with a grain of salt, right? Double check this, or, like, don't rely on it. And as you just saw, I got some evidence to the contrary right now, because I got a fire gem after killing that enemy with a bolt-based weapon. But I just have this idea, possibly purely superstitious, that if you target an enemy, they're going to, with a certain damage type, and they can drop a gem of that damage type, they're a little bit more likely to drop that same type, right? So targeting that enemy with the bolt damage, more likely to get a bolt gem. Maybe? I don't know. Could be pure superstition. That's not part of the document process, right? That's just my own superstition. Part of the document process is that's one way that you can run. Don't bother with the enemies out there, right? Then you do have to worry about the frenzy buildup, and the fact that I had to take off that gem that really boosts my frenzy resistance makes a huge difference there. It would be a real problem if I wanted to go and just farm those 2 additional enemies. Don't bother with that. Just run back and forth with that one enemy with the high discovery and, you know, kill it with whatever you feel like, right? If you don't want to subscribe to my superstitious theory, do it with fire. And that's what I want to show off now, actually, because remember, it took 5 hits, right? There was a full transform combo in the mix there, and it still took 2 more hits after that to defeat that enemy targeting bolt, and that's a defense the enemy is strong to. And even though, right, this weapon deals serrated damage in all forms, right, to beasts, and as far as I know, I could be wrong about this because I don't have an encyclopedic knowledge of which enemies count as, like, true beasts. I think the transformed humans are the ones that take the most damage from serrated weapons, so might be a little bit off on the role that serrated damage plays against that particular foe. Regardless, it's going to be the same weapon. I'm going to switch to fire damage. I'll cut ahead a little bit, and you'll see the difference. Okay, I am back, and I will show you that I have switched to the fire set of gems. Note that I'm only adding 190. This is a full set, right? I have 12.1% boost to fire, 12.6% boost to fire, 14.2% boost to fire. I don't have any of the flat bonuses for these fire gems, so it's not quite as strong as the bolt setup that I have going. In fact, you can tell exactly, right? It's getting 17 points less from that additional damage from the 157 base, right? But those 17 points of lower damage, we're going to see they're not going to matter, right? I'm going to run back. We're going to fight that same enemy because it will have respawned since I went to and from the dream. There it is. And we're going to try this again, and you should notice the difference. All right. Once again, attack. Look at that. I almost one-shot it. And certainly the transformation attack was enough to finish it off. Also, of course, because I did fire damage to this enemy, the parasites don't spawn at all. So I don't even have to deal with them. Huge, huge quality of life improvement just by switching to fire damage. Even though the damage numbers are lower, right? Only adding 190 as opposed to adding 207. So it makes a major difference depending on what damage type you target an enemy with. How easy or hard of a time you're going to have dispatching it, right? If it's strong to the damage you're dealing, you don't necessarily want to be dealing it. And of course, all the different enemies have different, stats that can make them difficult to deal with. One of the fun things about an Arcane playthrough is often you have the flexibility. Normally I'll have, one weapon set up to do fire and a different weapon set up to do bolt. This particular playthrough, I changed the setup, right, so that I could to try out the flat bonus damage to the Arcane Rifle Spear. That I have not been particularly thrilled with, and that's where I was a little bit less successful when it comes to farming, right? And I want to explain that problem, but I also want to explain, I wonder if I can view from back here or not. It might be, okay. I don't think it's going to be safe. So I think what I'm going to do is cut forward again, because I don't want to spend too much time on this. I will cut forward again, and I will go over an important correction I got from a comment on the previous episode. Okay, hello everyone. I am back. We've cut ahead, and if you look off to the left there, in the clouds, you can see, a shape emerging right there. And I'm going to get out the monocular. This was the correction I got. Well, maybe the monocular just isn't the best way to see it. Maybe you just have to look, right? So if you go from the top of the rocks in the, near ground just ahead of me, we're, just behind that tree that's growing up, there's a bunch of rocks. And then if you just look straight to the left, right, you'll see in the mist, you have that sort of peak coming out of the clouds. That is apparently, and maybe you can get a better view of this from the top of the Nightmare of Mensis. I've found reference to that online as well. But this is the correction that I got from YouTube commenter Piss Random. Thank you so much for setting me straight on this. I had in my head, right, as you probably heard from the last couple episodes, I was thinking, oh, where are the ship's masts that you can see from the Nightmare of Mensis? You can't see the ship's masts from the Nightmare of Mensis. The ship's masts are important, right? Because you can see them, as I already showed off, in the Nightmare Frontier. And when you get the DLC in the Hunter's Nightmare, you can see these ships that are sort of wrecks and their masts sort of stick up. And so the idea is, those are the ships in the Hunter's Nightmare that you can see from the Nightmare Frontier. Meanwhile, that thing that I directed your attention to, right, that sort of almost looks like a craggy cliff top in the mist, that is the arena where you fight Amygdala in the Nightmare Frontier. So actually, we're going to do one more thing, because that's one connection right there. And we're going to take it one step further. We're going to jump back to the Nightmare Frontier itself, and I'll show you something else. See you again soon. Okay, hello again, everyone. For you, that was just a couple seconds, if that, right? But here we are in the Nightmare Frontier. We're towards the beginning. If you come to this sort of outcropping here, and then you look up, you can see something. Almost looks like a castle out there, right? Well, if I sort of make use of my monocular, can zoom in and see that much closer, it is a sort of castle. It is like a long tower, a big loft. That right there is the Nightmare of Mensis. That is Mergo's loft. And you can see over here that other castle across the way where that glow was coming from and dealing all the frenzy damage to us over there, right? So you can see the Nightmare of Mensis adrift from the Nightmare Frontier, right? And so this gets back to that idea that I was talking about in the last episode about how the Nightmare realms might all be part of the same realm, just these different formulations out of this expanse, right, with these strange clouds, right? And then maybe as a whole there's this afterlife, and then there's individual nightmare realms, and maybe there's also even paradise type realms, right, more heavenly realms, sort of like maybe the Hunter's Dream, but then some of the people who are tied to the Hunter's Dream aren't necessarily big fans of the place. And so Maybe this more of a limbo? Very unclear what's going on here. But the important thing is, right, you have this sort of hierarchical structure where you can sort of see up and down. And then there's also a moment in the DLC where the DLC itself has different layers of reality that it takes place on. And there's an enemy that sort of drops from one layer of reality to another. And that sort of, if you haven't caught on already, really draws your attention to the fact that there are these like layers of sort of nightmares over top of and below each other, right? Up and down. There's a level of verticality to the construction of these sort of nightmare realms and possibly even the world of Yharnam itself that are relevant. And Piss Random was the one who sort of set me straight on the details of this theory, right? Because I knew about it in general, which is why I was bringing it up, but I incorrectly thought it was all down to the ship's masts, and it's not. It's a little bit more complicated than that. So thank you again for setting me straight there. Also, I believe Piss Random had mentioned that the idea of the choir having their realization, right? Maybe the cosmos is very close, only just above our heads. Maybe they're thinking about the nightmare realms that are stacked like just above and possibly penetrating into, according to my theory, right, their version of reality. Maybe that's what's going on there. So very interesting to think about that. And also, while we're doing sort of odds and ends and setting the record straight, I realized after I recorded the last episode that I completely failed to address something. The particular quest line that I mentioned had an anticlimactic finish, and then I sort of drove home the point unintentionally by ignoring it for a long time. We're going to go check in with Annalise, the Queen of the Vile Bloods, to make sure she's really okay after time went backwards for her flesh. Right, here we are back in the throne room, and sure enough, this is not a, like, scoured lump of flesh, like, scattered about and wriggling on the chair. Queen Annalise has returned.
Closest of kin, bearer of our blood, I welcome thee. What is thy wish?
I've been picking up these, stray blood dregs. I figure I could give you some. Oh, it doesn't show me how many I have. I was going to give her all but one. Oh, okay. I can figure it out by the fact that it won't let me offer more than 6. I'll give you 5 of them.
Thy gift pleases us. Let this reward be thine. Indulge thyself in our tainted blood.
And that's it. That's like all you can do. And it's the same thing that we got before. It's the same thing we see again, right? We can just offer her the other one or we can leave. So it's almost like she doesn't acknowledge the fact that she got beaten to a pulp. And I mean, maybe you can say, right, her flesh got rewound in terms of time. So maybe she doesn't have any memory of it happening. She was rewound far enough. I don't know. It's not very satisfying, unfortunately. Like, I feel like this is one of the places there are, for the most part, I think Bloodborne does a really good job if you're just playing through the game for the first time, trying to figure everything out, putting things together. Like, you can't necessarily see the ways in which the sort of rush to finish the game really impacted development. When you really dig in, you can start to see it. But if you're just having like a first time experience with Bloodborne, I think you're going to come away with the impression that like they planned everything out, particularly if you're playing version 1.09, where they really did get a little bit more time to sort of iron out the rough edges, right? You're going to get this impression of a very polished game, I think. Again, once you start to really dig in, you can sort of start to see where they had to cut corners a bit. And but even then, right, even in the more polished experience first time thing, I think anyone is going to just be a little bit dissatisfied with the way that Queen Annalise's storyline goes here. And there's actually technically a little bit more to it, but I don't think I can do it in version 1.00 anymore because you can't make root chalices in version 1.00. Actually, I want to verify that. I'm going to go back to the Hunter's Dream. It's actually sort of tied in with that dialogue that I stepped all over, right? She mentions that this chamber was not meant for one alone. And that's supposed to be a little bit of a hint for you to go out and do some chalice dungeoneering. I'll talk about that a little bit more in the Hunter's Dream. Okay, so here's the thing, right? To play version 1.00, you need a physical copy of the game, and then you need to disconnect your system from the internet. Because if you connect to the internet, it will automatically update the game to the latest version, which is normally you'd think what you'd want to have happen, right? Except if you're specifically looking to play 1.00, then that's going to be a problem. So we have this one additional chalice altar here that I've left open for various reasons, and we're going to attempt to do a root chalice ritual here. Maybe I don't have many, if any, like really low level. Maybe I can buy some ritual blood. See if I can just buy that from these messengers here. Ritual materials. Yeah, I can. Okay, I have one. I'll buy 2 more. Okay. And I want to test this because here's the thing. Eventually, they patched the game so that the root chalices, which I believe they didn't change the text on. I'm not seeing it here, actually. Hold on. Okay, it's on the Sinister one for sure. Interesting. Okay, so the Sinister text will tell you, Sinister text, the Sinister Chalice text will tell you in the little note, right? You can see that very final section of text. There's something that looks like a weird asterisk. It's sort of like a Japanese version of one. That indicates that this is a note, it's out of character, and it's communicating to you, the player, and it lets you know that the additional right Sinister Bell is for online use. And it can't be, like, so offline, the bell-ringing woman will not appear, right? And that's sort of the purpose of the Sinister Chalices. So the game does sort of give you a heads up that you can't use those chalices offline. If you want to use a root chalice, at some point in the game, they allow you to do that without being connected to the internet. But I have read that in version 1.00, you cannot create a root chalice offline. And of course, you have to be offline in order to play 1.00, otherwise the game will automatically update, and you don't want that. So, yep, look at this. It's coming up with a message right here. In order to perform a root chalice ritual, you must connect to the internet, a network, because, it has to apply some sort of server data, right? So, I can't make a root chalice. And root chalices are a great way to get gems. That's true, Gameplay Matt, but your mentioning it also proves that you've lost the thread. The whole reason I originally wanted to bring up the importance of being unable to create root chalices was because it ties in with an aspect of Queen Annalise's story. You see, in version 1.09, you get that dialogue about her chamber not being made for one alone after you enter the Great Tumaru Eel Chalice. This ties in with an item called the Ring of Betrothal, which you can randomly find as a treasure in some root chalices associated with Tumaru Eel. Should you discover that ring and take the hint to speak again with Annalise, you'd find a new option to propose marriage, though she turns you down no matter what. Anyway, since this item is otherwise useless and your interactions with Annalise don't lead to any real change one way or the other, the whole interaction feels like another of those disappointing rough edges that even the latest version of the game can't fully address, except maybe as fuel for people to speculate about the game's lore. But then, that's still better than playing version 1.00 of the game nowadays, since you can't even use a root chalice to find the Ring of Betrothal in the first place. But as Gameplay Matt wound up being more concerned with, there are also mechanical drawbacks to being unable to create root chalices, because that's how you find the best gems. This is the dilemma, right? This is why I sort of suspect I'm never really going to get the Arcane Rifle Spear up and going. Even though I've got back to 1.00 where it can happen, allow me to demonstrate, actually. I wonder if I can make a... Oh, actually, before I demonstrate, I need to save scum. So I'm going to jump off the game. I'll cut ahead and perform the Chalice Ritual, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Okay, I have reloaded everything after exporting my save to the appropriate file here, and I'm going to make a Lower Loran Chalice. I need more Blood Echoes, of course. So I'm just going to use some of my... Doesn't really matter which one I use because I'm just going to reset anyway, but still, I'll use one of... I have 9 of these. I'll use one of these. It's not enough. Okay. I'll use another one. And we'll get the appropriate number of blood echoes going. We'll just use another one of these. That should be enough. And now we can perform the chalice ritual to create the lower Hintertomb chalice. Why am I creating the lower Hintertomb chalice? I'm creating the lower Hintertomb chalice because the first boss, right, the boss of the first layer of the lower Hintertombs is a brainsucker. Brainsucker enemies drop gems that have the flat arcane addition property, right? So brainsucker enemies are the enemies that I want to be hunting, that I want to be farming, if I want to go for, if I want to go for the Arcane Rifle Spear. I need to be targeting brainsuckers. So let me just make sure that I'm switching back to lightning or bolt damage here, because that's going to be the most effective way to deal damage to... Oops. That's going to be the most effective way to deal damage to said brainsucker, which I know I will get as the boss of this lower Hintertomb chalice. So we're going to go ahead and jump right into the Chamber of the Seal and start running things from there. Right. So here we are in the lower Hintertombs. I still have my discovery boosting set up because in version 1.00, bosses in the Chalice dungeons are not guaranteed to drop you blood gems like they are in 1.09. Or I don't necessarily know if they're 100% guaranteed. They're definitely much more likely in version 1.09 to give you that boost. Okay, which way am I going? I'm going down all the way to the door in the end. That's right. And because I've done this a few times. Now, I got a tip about this from a viewer who is interested in figuring out the specific mechanics surrounding getting the Arcane Rifle Spear up and going, to dig into how exactly it works in this 1.00 version of the game. And I thought that would be interesting, again, for documentary purposes. All right. Congratulations, buddy. You hurt me. Let's open this door. Just keep going. Staple of Bloodborne. Run past everything. You'll be fine. I think it was Rhetorical, if I recall correctly, who was giving me this very useful information. So you can come in here. And Rhetorical also was aware that brainsuckers would be the enemies that I would need to target if I was interested in getting this to work. And was also aware that a guaranteed way to face a brainsucker enemy would be to go to the lower Hintertomb chalice. So I followed the advice. Now, there are other places where you can find brainsucker enemies, right? So, for instance, you could be going through the Ease Chalice. The issue with the Ease Chalice is the brainsucker enemies there all drop triangle gems, because each Chalice dungeon sort of has its own way of, its own shape of gem that it specializes in. Tumaru specializes in radials, and Ease specializes in triangular, and what's the other one? Loran specializes in... Do not want to get hit by that paralyzing beam. Loran specializes in waning. So that's why I was able to get so many good waning gems. Please stop. Thank you. And of course, with my weapon being as overpowered as it is, right? So here's the thing. The Hintertombs, I found some information that backs this up online. It says the Hintertombs drop radial gems. My experience right here is this. The lower Hintertomb drops triangular gems. So I don't think, originally I was thinking I could come in here, farm this brainsucker, get the sort of secondary effect of an additional, plus, it wouldn't be like a super strong effect. This is only a depth 3 dungeon, right? So maybe plus 20, plus 30 flat arcane damage, but getting plus whatever flat arcane damage in the 2 radial slots that are open right now on the rifle spear, I thought maybe that would be enough to get it to work. But I can't even do that because this brainsucker here, which was my target, tends to drop triangular gems. And now I'm going to save scum. And I'll explain that process because I realized in the course of a loading screen, it might also be interesting to document just for the sake of it, while I'm doing this documentary style thing in this playthrough, the process of save scumming. So anyway, I'll be right back. All right, and I'm back, and look, I didn't spend any of those, what do you call it, cold blood things here, right? These are back to 9. These frenzied cold blood things are still back at 9 here. And I think I need to switch my gem setup from fire to bolt again. Now, how did that happen in a game like Bloodborne, where it's basically saves every step, right? The autosave is incredibly aggressive in these games. They really don't want you save scumming. They don't want you to be able to, like, do a whole playthrough of something and figure out. They want you to experience consequences and then live with them, right? They don't, like, if you die, they don't want you to just be able to go back to your last save point, reload, and try again until you perfect it. And so it's sort of part of the philosophy of these games that you don't do that sort of thing. Well, you know, that's all well and good, but the PlayStation 4 has what I think is a very useful feature for a number of reasons, not just for this particular one, very sort of broad, thoughtful, I think, functionality, where they allow you to sort of export your save file from certain games to a USB stick, right? So if you have a USB drive attached to your PlayStation 4, you can export a save file to it. Bloodborne, the way it saves its games, like for each character that you make, it has like the one save file for each character, and then the most up-to-date thing is the one that's saved there. But if it's automatically updating your save in the system storage, it doesn't automatically update the one that you can export to the USB. So what you can do is you can go to the PlayStation 4 settings menu, go to Application Save Data Management, copy your Bloodborne save data from the system to the USB, and then if you need to restore an older save file, right, make progress in the game, make the chalice like I did previously, you can then go back to the system of the PlayStation 4. This process automatically shuts you out of the game of Bloodborne. You can then load the data from the USB stick back onto the PlayStation 4, and from that point on, you can play as if, like you just saw from the start of me loading back in here. That's how you get the ability to actually sort of do a manual save for Bloodborne, which the game itself doesn't allow you to do, right? It's sort of exploiting a PlayStation 4 system feature. People have been doing this for a very long time. A lot of people figured it out when they wanted to experience all 3 of Bloodborne's endings, but they only wanted to play through the game once. And I sort of feel like that goes against the spirit of Bloodborne. But on the other hand, it's very, very helpful for situations where it's happened to me in several playthroughs, right, where I realized I wasn't recording. Well, if I've got a USB backup, I can reload to that thing and I can try and, like, re-record if I catch it in time. If I don't catch it in time, if I get too far, it's not going to help me. But in this particular case, right, so I always like to have a little bit of backup, and in this particular case, I wanted to show off the, like, uselessness of the Hintertomb, the lower Hintertomb chalice, for my purposes here. I also want to show off the other possibility, right? Because I was talking about other places that you can get brainsucker enemies. Well, you can get this depth 5 ease chalice, which is like the lower depth, the more difficult things, but the greater the rewards, right? That's how these games are set up. This is Bloodborne, right? No exception to that, right? And you can see, right, to the right of the screen here, under that little messenger symbol, we have the depth. And then if you look all the way over to the right, it's depth 5, right? And that's as low as the chalice's depths go. So this is maximum difficulty. This is the lowest depth. I'm going to go to the lowest layer, and we're going to farm some brainsuckers. All right, we're back. So I want to just sort of outline the problem again, right? Which is I need radials that add flat arcane to my rifle spear to make it work. And right now, I don't have a great source of radials. If I want flat arcane boosting gems, I need to hunt brainsuckers. So what's the point of coming in here? Because I said before, ease drops triangle gems just like the lower Hintertomb. Well, there is an effect called an out of shape gem. And I haven't verified that it works on 1.00. It might not. But, oh, I need my blue elixirs out. This is also why you may have noticed my insight is way lower than it used to be. I've been buying blue elixirs with my insight, and blue elixirs are very helpful for this room, because there are enemies that will fire at you from afar if they catch on to your presence. But the blue elixir helps keep them from catching on to your presence, while you can take out 3 different brainsuckers in this particular room. Well, I mean, they'll catch on eventually, but it's nowhere near as annoying as if you don't do this. He automatically jumps over there. All right, see, the other one caught on. But it's far enough away that I don't have to be too annoyed, right? There's 3 brain suckers right there. And none of them even dropped any gems. So joke's on me, I suppose. That's my farming route right there. You can go up. There's at least one more brain sucker, I think, in that room, but not worth dealing with the top part of that stairwell. Anyway, as I was saying, you can get these out-of-shape gem drops, potentially, right? Out of shape, right, meaning just the fact that the normal Eve's shape is triangular, but there is something like a 2% chance every time there's a gem drop in the East dungeon that you get something that's other than triangular. You could get waning, or you could get radial. So ideally, I would want to kill a brain sucker, have it drop an out-of-shape gem in the right shape, right? It would have to be radial, not waning. And it would then need to have the flat arcane boost, and hopefully it would, because brain suckers tend to drop that sort of gem, but can't guarantee that, right? And then I could add that to my rifle spear to get it going. However, just the sheer luck that I would need to get that drop means it's a very long, hard grind. And that's how I got so many levels. It's because I was running that route that you just saw, and you could see that I was pretty practiced and knew basically what to expect out of that scenario. I ran that route for a couple hours, and I did not get a single radial gem drop out of it. And this is why I was saying I haven't verified that you can get out of shape drops in 1.00. That might have been something they added later on. It might still be in 1.00, but it's just so rare that I haven't gotten it, right? I don't know what's the case. But that, again, I wanted to sort of document the sort of process that I've been doing off screen here, just so that you have an idea how that works, how save scumming works, and how it sort of has influenced the history of this game and the way people interact with it. So that's going to do it for like the documentary side of this episode, I think. I think that was an interesting sort of addition. Interesting that we got the dolls asleep dialogue here when she's standing up. They probably fixed that in a later version of the game as well. But we're going to now turn to actually making some progress through the Nightmare of Mensis. As you know, I like to make at least a little bit of forward progress in every episode. I want to get through this before the end of the year. Like, I don't want my 10-year celebration of Bloodborne to turn into an 11-year celebration of Bloodborne. So we're going to get moving. We're going to head back to the Nightmare of Mensis, make at least a little bit of progress in this episode. Behold the magic of editing, where even though I selected the wrong place to warp into, I appeared in the right place. But actually what I did was I warped into the lantern over way down that way, right? Across from, where is it? Across from that bridge over there with the weird glow thing that like drains your life. I didn't want to just run across because I don't have that rune on. I'm all in on discovery still. So I didn't want to risk without that greater protection that very short run, because I feel like I would have lost a bunch of life and even blood vials. So I just went straight back to that, used that lantern to go straight back to the dream, and then warped in here to the appropriate place, cut all of that out so you didn't have to get bothered by me doing that. But anyway, now we're going to pick up where we left off with this elevator here. We're going to make a little bit more progress through Marigo's Loft, as we know this place is called, thanks to the information we got on those screens. That sort of warp in screen on the dream. There we go, just rally my health back. I was hearing some people say, thinking of rally, somewhere, I can't remember where exactly, that the rally mechanic sort of loses relevance as the game goes on. And, you know, to a certain extent, right, against certain enemies, I feel like that's a good point, stands to reason, pretty accurate, right? If the enemies can, first of all, if they do multiple quick hits, that, like, really does not play nicely with the rally system. And then also, if they do like one big hit and they just don't give you a lot of time, that can be another instance of causing trouble for the rally system. Like, you become less and less able to rally back your HP, right? I've been talking about all these different gem effects, right? And there are ways that you can boost the rally effect of weapons, right? There's a certain, and you can't really, it's difficult to really boost rally, if I recall correctly. Like, each weapon just has a set amount of rally that it does, and then you can get the gems that boost that base level. I think it would be pretty cool, and I've seen people who've done this, to put together builds that are designed to, like, it doesn't matter how much you hurt me because my regain level is so high that as I take damage, I'm just rallying it back constantly. I think that would be a fun, like, very high vitality, very high regain. I think that would be a fun build to make. But it's not, it's sort of a difficult build, and it's not very relevant, right? It's just not necessarily the best way to interact with the game. But I think it would be an interesting playthrough, right? Because especially at this point in Bloodborne's life cycle, I feel like interesting ways to interact with the game have gained more priority than ever. And I think that would be an interesting way to interact with the game. I don't necessarily know exactly how much effort you'd have to put in to achieve that result, so maybe it's not worth it, right? Maybe the people who've done it can speak more. I mean, definitely the people who've done it can speak more authoritatively on the process. But I do think it would be interesting to give it a shot if it's not too difficult. All right, and then of course there is someone just on the other side of the screen. I think I can hit them. Yeah, haha. Difficult to finish them off through the screen, though. This is a fun setup because these enemies here will turn around and just start attacking me. Actually, I wonder, I had these blue elixirs out. Will they make a difference? They will. That's kind of cool. Because if you don't have the blue elixir, these people would definitely be attacking me right now. And one of them has a crossbow. Not anymore. And that other enemy in the back there would be rushing forward. This is actually pretty effective. I'm glad I found a good place to really show off what the blue elixir can do. Because this situation is very different if you don't have the blue elixir. And as you can see, right, rally did not help me in that situation. It would be more helpful of me just to have healed. Right, so there is something to the idea that rally becomes less relevant as you make progress through the game. But at the same time, like I said, I do think that would be an interesting way to sort of try and change up the experience of playing through Bloodborne. Had a little bit of fun doing that with my twin pistol build. I kind of want to go back to that one. I've been mostly just focused on this one, so I don't really feel like going back and just playing all these parts of the game that I've just finished playing with that other build, even though it is a new experience with the game. I've sort of been waiting for this playthrough to be over. But I am excited, actually, now to go back and just see what that's like with the twin pistol setup. Especially because I really wanted to get the Arcane Rifle Spear to work, and it's going to be very difficult, right? Farming those out-of-shape gems, I think that's just going to have to be something I try to do when I've got some spare time, right? I'm thinking of shifting my Translation-Born playthrough, which I still have a save file for, over to my PlayStation 5, playing there. And then I could leave the PlayStation 4 with this setup and just, in the background, quietly chip away, hoping for an out-of-shape drop, and maybe eventually get the Arcane Rifle Spear going to some degree. And once that's been accomplished, I can revisit, like, in a video, and we can sort of try and dig into the mechanics of that. But I don't know. We'll see. May or may not be feasible. Of course, I've just been talking over the fact this is one of the most iconic moments in the game here. These enemies right here, right? We have a dog with the head of a crow. This is the difficulty of it being 10 years, right? I want to celebrate all these different aspects of the game, but it's been 10 years and I played this game a lot. So this is sort of faded into the background for me. It's no longer like mind-blowing stuff. Oh, and yep, here there is one who's still alive. This is a crow with the head of a dog. I love that they do this. I love that they do this. I was talking before about the enemies that sort of get revived in the situation in Yahar Ghul, right? I thought that was cool, right? Interesting reuse of enemies. This is a fantastic reuse of two enemies we've seen before. They're not even particularly strong, right? They're not like, these aren't like super deadly foes, but they're really striking, right? They make a huge impression on you. And you get to see like the dog head on the crow body and the crow head on the dog body, and you get to just be like, well, that is just wrong. What's going on here? Really drives home the idea that you're running around a nightmare, right? A world where things that should be impossible are just the way that things work. I think that's extremely cool. There we go. All these gems that don't help my build at all. But, you know, like I said before, got a little bit of a completionist streak in me. And can we get this down? No, okay. That was wishful thinking. I know we can take this down. Here we go. I wonder if up there is where you can get that better look at the Amygdala Arena. Oh well, I'm not going to stop in this little ride here. And here we are, right back at the lantern. If I weren't ridiculously over-leveled, I'd be, you know, leveling up over at the doll there to get rid of these excess blood echoes. But, like, because I did so much of that farming, it now takes over 100,000 blood echoes for me to gain a level. So it's not, like, 65,000 is only a little over the halfway mark. So not necessarily worth it. Anyway, I realized the first half of this episode was sort of, even more than the first half, really. The first, like, large segment of this episode was mostly for, like, documentary purposes. Did a little bit of an odds and ends sort of feel to it, but we did make enough progress in the Nightmare of Mensis that I feel like next time, particularly because the place that we're about to go is a place that I think deserves its own episode, deserves its own focus. So for now, I'm going to call an end to my hunt for the evening. And as always, feel free to share any thoughts that you might have with me. If you have any of your experiences that you want to document in the comments, if you want to correct me about anything that I said, I really appreciate that, as you got from this episode with, you know, Piss Random, that comment just being like, hey, I think you're wrong about the ship's masts. I was totally wrong. And it's better to have that record corrected. So if there's anything else like that that you want to bring up about the playthrough, please let me know. I'll try and incorporate it, as I've said before, into the episodes going forward. If not, that's fine. Especially, I realize that especially as we get sort of less lore intensive, the recursive nature of me responding to other people's thoughts on the lore goes down, right? And so this was very mechanical and like just based on the experience of playing 1.00 and the particular struggles that I'm having, get even this idea of a 1.00 exclusive build with the Arcane Rifle Spear going. So I don't know, if you feel like that was badly balanced also, just let me know. I don't anticipate another episode like this in the future, but if you don't like this sort of thing, that's helpful to know. Anyway, I'm just gabbing on at this point. Thank you all very much for joining me. As I said before, I'm calling an end to my hunt for the evening, but I wish all of you good hunting. Oh, come on now. Come on now. All right, everybody. For real, good hunting.